Artistic Director of MaMa, and nobody can hear me because I'm not speaking into the microphone. Okay, welcome everybody. It's so nice to see you. Welcome to MaMa. Mia would like to say hi, so here you go.
Hi. For those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Mia Yu, and I'm the artistic director. I'm part of the team here at MaMa. I say hello to all of us in this room, but also our folks online, because we're streaming on HowlRound, right, today? Amazing. What an inspiring group of people that we have here. I'm a little nervous and excited. This is amazing. And we have this extraordinary group of workshop leaders. I just think this, oh my gosh, no, hi Liz. Wonderful. Well, I'm only imagining that this is going to be an incredible, is it 3 days? 4 days? And I'm excited to hear all about it. I'll try to sneak in and out when I can. So proud and honored that this is happening here, Stages of Change, and always so thrilled and honored to be working with our curator, David Diamond.
Thanks, Mia, and I wanted to just thank so many people for helping make all this happen. First of all, MaMa, and also Culture Hub, who were involved with the technical side of things, HowlRound, where they're live streaming, where we're live streaming from. All of the team of MaMa and Culture Hub have been amazing. Mostly, though, I want to thank you for being here, and because it wouldn't be anything without you, and to these wonderful friends who are here joining us today. So Stages of Change came about around this idea of, well, what can we do now to bring people together and to deal with what's happening in the world and what artists can do and how artists can be involved in solving problems and helping people expand their consciousness. So this event is the first of what will be hopefully many. Upcoming, we'll be having a workshop with playwright Eric N. On October 30th. On November 3rd, Julian Boal will be doing a kind of seminar. But Julian is before that doing a whole series of workshops at TUNYC with Liz and gang. So we're kind of collaborating together on that. And for those of you who don't know, MaMa is having its big annual gala on November 5th. And they're honoring this guy named Frank Carucci. Frank Carucci. So we'd love to see you there. So one of the reasons that I put this little group together and wanted everybody to share what they have to say is because I was remembering how my life changed when I learned about all of these different ways of working, ways of connecting people. And it really came to fruition at a big event that was here, the Theater and Peace Building Conference that was organized by Theater Without Borders and the Brandeis University. And thanks to Daniel, he was instrumental in making that happen, along with Kat Fiu and Cynthia Cohen and Roberta Levito and many others. So at that time, I kind of learned about a lot of these things that I didn't know even existed. And it just shifted the whole trajectory of what I wanted to do in the theater. And so I thought, well, what can we do now that will help other people maybe have that kind of experience that will allow them to see, oh, these are things I didn't know were out there. I didn't know you could do that and connect with people through theater. So that's why we present this to you. The importance, I believe, in meeting face-to-face and not just on Zoom. No offense. But I think it's really important that we share space together at these days. Connect with each other, understand that we are each other's community, and that we can work together. It's also important to learn new things from the experts in those areas. And I'm so thrilled to have these, these wonderful artists here to share what they do with you, which has been always so inspiring to me. So we should get going here with, well, I just want to say about the rest of the weekend that we're focusing these workshops on embodied experience, not just talking. Like today we'll be talking, and you're encouraged to join in the conversation. The rest of the weekend's workshops will be some talking, but also embodied work. I think that's really important. This afternoon, when Hannah presents playback theater. Just a little housekeeping things. The emergency exits are back there and down the stairs there where you came in. Let's try not to be on cell phones during this period. And if you want to speak, then just raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone because nobody on the live stream can hear you otherwise. And we encourage participation. So the first question I have, and then I'll sit down, is instead of me introducing everybody, because everybody can look up their bios and have probably already done that and knows who they are in general, but the question I have is how do you personally describe who you are as an artist in the world today and what you do as part of what your real passion is for doing. And it doesn't have to be the specifics of what you're doing here. It could be anything that comes to mind as, well, this is who I am, instead of listing off credits. So I'm going to start to give them time to think. Oh, what am I going to say? So what I would say is I am a curator of spaces and people and groups with an eye toward expanding creativity and opening us all up to deeper experience of community and caring.
Hi. Can I steal yours? That's really nice. I try to do that also.
This is Derek Goldman, by the way.
Hi, everybody. First of all, just what a beautiful blessing, really, to be gathered with old friends, new friends, and sort of in this moment to be coming together to kind of think about our practice in this way. So thank you, David, for bringing us together hugely. I'm Derek Goldman. I'll introduce myself through the organization that I founded and lead, which is called the Laboratory for Global Performance and Politics, which is based in Washington with a mission to humanize politics through performance. My background is as a theater maker, but it's always been specifically with a sort of deeper interest, I would say, in what theater can and maybe should do in and for the world than just in kind of doing it in the quote-unquote industry. And increasingly the exact work that we're here to look at this weekend, which is really, I've moved away from spending as much time in sort of rehearsal rooms making plays in the traditional sense and moved towards how we use our art form, employ our art form to build trust, to build connection, sometimes in art settings and sometimes in non-art settings. And I feel I guess the last thing I'll say about the lab and our work is everything we do is really so much about relationship building in the deepest sense, and that is so broken and eroded in so many contexts. So a big shift, midlife shift in my life was spending a little less time in rehearsal rooms and a little more time in spaces where I'm the only artist in the space or the only self-defining artist, and that has been life-changing for me, both in terms of curiosity and going places, and in terms of thinking about the power of what we do as artists and how it can be useful in a broken world. So that's probably longer than you wanted, but
That's fine.
Do you want Liz?
Yeah. Liz, are you ready? You're
Oh,
up.
is it my turn? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I feel like the great and powerful Oz up here. My name is Liz Morgan. I use she, her pronouns. First and foremost, I'm a multi-hyphenate, multidisciplinary theater artist. The workshop I'll be leading is based in my practice of Theater of the Oppressed at Theater of the Oppressed NYC. I'm the director of strategy and learning. And the type of facilitation I do is called jokering. I also like to talk about it as difficultating, right? Facilitating is to make things easier, and difficultating means I get to challenge people, but also I get to transform narratives of harm into opportunities for healing and transformation, and I think that's really fun. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Jess?
Hi, is this on? I'm sorry, it's so phallic. I'm Jessica Litwack, and I guess I want to go back a little bit because I think that's the best way to explain what I do. I started my life in the theater in this building in the late 70s. I was just a preschooler. No, I was a theater maker. I was an experimental theater artist, and at the time in the resident company here at MaMa, and it really was the most incredible thing. I felt like I was part of a movement, part of a revolution to make art that reflected truth. And then afterwards, I also studied traditional acting and got very much into the business, which then hit me with a kind of sense of narcissism. I felt like I wasn't addressing the issues in the world, and I was focusing on myself and surrounded by other people focusing on themselves. So I became a drama therapist, and I studied playback and Theater of the Oppressed, and I came back to MaMa, and when I came back to MaMa is when I became involved with Theater Without Borders, which both Daniel and David and Derek and I have been involved with over the years, and that's when I started bringing my theater making skills and my drama therapy skills into the field, and I traveled to the Middle East a lot, and Eastern Europe and various places. I was working internationally, mostly making theater for personal and social change. And then I came back and got my doctorate with that title in Theater for Personal and Social Change, and that's what I do. I'm a writer, I'm an actor still, and an educator, and I feel like what I want to do is to mainly get people talking to each other, building communities. My company, the HEAT Collective, stands for Healing, Education, Activism, and Theater, and we build collectives wherever we go, and that's what I'm hoping to do with you this weekend. So we become, as Ellen Stewart always said, a family.
So stimulating already. It's like 12 minutes in. What was the question? I think this question came in while I was driving via email, so I'm just going to riff off of what other people have said. I'm Hannah Fox. I am a peacekeeper, an activist, a change maker. I do that mostly through theater, storytelling, dance. I'm a mom. That's my main job, I would say, my main creative outlet and project of a 13-year-old, almost 13-year-old, very active boy who just fell and dislocated his shoulder about 20 minutes ago. He's okay. And I practice playback theater around the world. I teach playback theater in many different countries and also locally. I'm also a yoga teacher and a dance teacher, and I use the body as a way into my playback work because our bodies are houses of many, many stories. So today, if you're with me, we will be entering into the work, into the personal storytelling work on stage through the body. I am second generation. My parents created playback theater in the 70s. So They are now in their 80s and late 70s, so I've been sort of holding the torch for them for a while, but I can feel the weight of it more and more as they get a little bit more frail and it gets a bit heavy and they need to sit down. So that's a lot on my shoulders. But there happens to be a huge community of second generation, third generation, fourth generation playback theater artists now in 80 countries. So I'm in good company, and I think what we mainly do is build bridges and try to listen compassionately using theater.
Thank you. Daniel.
Just taking it all in. It's beautiful. I'm Daniel Banks. 20 years ago, Adam McKinney and I formed an organization called DNA Works. Our mission is dialogue and healing through the arts. I make theater, I dramaturg, community organizing, but really, I'd love the provocation, David, to say what we do rather than who we are. I create reasons for people to come together in a room and create something called art in order to open people's hearts so that we can actually hear each other better and see each other better and move closer to one another. And in the words of a mentor of mine, Yavila McCoy, holding spaces for people to fall in love with each other. And I'll mention that, as several people on the panel have said, that my artwork has led me into other spaces as well. And I co-founded a project in Fort Worth, Texas, to transform the still standing former Ku Klux Klan headquarters of Texas into a center for art and community healing, named after a black man who was lynched in 1921 that the city has still not officially recognized. And Mr. Fred Rouse, it will be the Fred Rouse Center for Arts and Community Healing. And when folks asked how we could get such a preposterous project off the ground in Texas over the last 6 years, I said I treated it like a devising ensemble theater piece. Brought together a coalition of 7 other organizations, all of whom represent the populations that were targeted by the Klan in the 20s. And we met for 2 years monthly before we became an organization and listened to each other and shared and did all the things that we do in rehearsal. And so our opening will be in 2027, which will be 100 years to the year of when the building was actually vacated by the KKK. So, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Fantastic. While we don't have a lot of time, I would love to hear maybe just your names of everybody that's in this room and everybody who's on the live stream. You can put it in the chat or something. But just your names. I want to go around the room, speak yourself into the space, and understand that we're all part of the same group.
Hi, I'm Carson Grace Becker and from Chicago.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lillian Ribeiro from Newark, New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Peck from New York.
Hi, I'm Tina Ball.
Hi, I'm Joan Kane from New York City, and I'm grateful to be here.
Hi, I'm Molly Cohen from Baltimore.
Courtney Ryan from Pennsylvania.
Leslie Felbane in Between Homes.
Ronette Mushketblit from Tel Aviv.
Jeannie Marie Brown from Connecticut.
Hi, I'm Tara Vandergall from Anchorage, Alaska, and also Sullivan County, New York.
My name is Simon. I'm from Korea.
I'm Pierce. I'm from New York.
I'm Robin Irwin, and I'm from Boston.
I'm Glory.
Hi, I'm Tom Cavanaugh. I'm from Edison, New Jersey.
I'm Liza Zapol, and I'm from faraway Brooklyn.
I'm Harsh. I'm from New York.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're all in this together. I'm so happy. Happy that we're all here. Well, I'm inspired already by what you guys are doing, but there are a couple of things I'd love for us to get into. First of all, what led you to doing the kind of work that you do now? Like, how did you find your way in, and what were you hoping to find when you got into it originally? Daniel wants to say something.
Sure. Well, actually, my first thought was, when I was a freshman in college, I met this woman named Sabrina Peck, who's sitting in the front row, who created this amazing organization called City Step and gave the hardest dance classes I'd ever taken at that point, but also created opportunities for us to go into the public schools in Cambridge and work with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders using dance as a vocabulary for self-expression and really peace building. I mean, we didn't call it that at the time, but looking back on it, that's what it was. And I really think the only example prior to that I had was when I was in high school. Planned Parenthood had a group called Youth Expression Theater that would go into schools and do skits and plays that that would cover the topics that Planned Parenthood covered and create opportunities for learning among teens. And I was accepted into it. It was something that someone in my neighborhood was part of. I was hugely impressed by it. I was accepted, and my a Catholic, nice Jewish boy at a Catholic boys' school would not allow me to do it. And their excuse was it would interrupt the school day, but I suspect there were other reasons that they didn't want me working with Planned Parenthood. And so working with Sabrina was the first opportunity that I had to really mix arts with a sense of making the world a better place, or repair of the world, tikkun olam. And so it's quite wonderful that you're here, that I get to honor you and say that it's all your fault.
Just before we move on, what was like sort of the next iteration? Like, what got you deeper into this work? And I know you work with hip hop and you work with NYU and all these other things. What did it just sort of, as a career coach person, I'm always interested in how these things manifest themselves.
I think that there are a myriad of invisible doors that open daily for any number of us, and sometimes we see them and sometimes we don't. And I just happened to be in a bunch of places where things hit me upside the head and said, do this. I mean, another example is I was teaching acting at the Williamstown Theater Festival, and they asked if the co-acting teacher and I would do a workshop with the Center for the Aged. And I had grown up with 2 great-grandmothers and 4 grandparents and was very comfortable with elders. And I didn't know how to do a workshop. So, I thought, well, what can non-actors do? We can tell stories. And I just kind of, out of necessity, I would say, if I was going to give you a one-word answer, it would be necessity. That things just happened that needed to happen, and I said, okay, sure, yes, I'll figure it out. There wasn't a grand conscious plan, but I think there was a grander plan of some sort.
I think that's true of a lot of us, that, there wasn't we didn't actually, how do you plan to do this? It's sort of things.
It took a lot of planning, David. A lot of emails.
That's true. Did you want to jump in there?
There is a doctor, and I'm forgetting his name, but he and many others are arguing that there is no free will. It's all determined. I'll try to remember his name because it's really fascinating research. I did the opposite, or I ran far away. My parents created this funky thing, and it was super embarrassing for me to have parents who ran around in, colorful, flowy clothes, and rehearsed like, banshees every Thursday night, making lots of sounds and movements and publicly. And so I would lie when people would say, what does your dad do? I would say he's a professor because he taught clowning at SUNY New Paltz. And they would say, well, what does he teach? And I would say English or something like that. And that was, so I had to, it was, playback theater was very nascent. This is the 70s, and there was one playback theater company. It was upstate New York. Playback theater just meant this one company, and they were developing this technique that now, as I said, is in 80 countries. It's, very, the seed has spread. And so I went to college, I think probably to get away from my parents, who were very, very preoccupied with their art, to the University of Oregon. And I danced. I was a dancer. And then I went to the Himalayas, and for almost a year was up in a village without running water or electricity, teaching English, but I was really learning a lot about pre-industrial life. I came back to town, and there was a poster on the bulletin board at the health food store that said Playback Theater Workshop. So it was many years later, I kind of bumped back into it across the country and went to this workshop taught by a woman I knew when I was a child, and sort of re-entered the world in a super random way. And it was sort of like coming home, and there were 17 of us, and we started a company, and that was my first company. And, from there on, I have practiced and taught playback, but dance has always been such a love language for me, and my company's movement is very important, but also devising. I came back to New York and went to NYU to study devising and autobiographical storytelling and performance. So, it's just neat, all these different connections that we have here, in so many ways into the house. But again, it's, it's story and connection and, trying to find the ways that we understand each other and connect despite different backgrounds and even points of view. I don't know, again, what the question was.
Should we?
Yep.
Liz, do you want to? I don't want to go always in the same order, so it should be a little more random. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a version that I could say that's sort of the out of necessity thing, right? I graduated with my MFA from Brown Trinity's acting program in 2013, came into the city and was performing as well as being a teaching artist. And then one of the teaching artist orgs I worked for was like, oh, you have to train with Theater for the Oppressed NYC to onboard. And so I did that. And then, shortly after that, the current roster of Jokers, they were recruiting and asked me on board. And I could say that the rest is history. But part of why I am still with this group versus other kind of more traditional teaching artist orgs is that at the same time that I was graduating from Brown Trinity, that same year, 2013, I lost my best friend, who was a dancer that had passed away during her time in the Peace Corps. So grief was also a big part of my sort of formulating my identity as a professional artist, and I was really trying to make sense of the idea of legacy, right? Because she passed away having done so many significant things with her life in such a short amount of time, including building a clinic in Ghana to serve the population there that was living with HIV/AIDS. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'm here in the city, I'm performing, I'm auditioning for a lot of kind of commercial theater, commercial film and TV work that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. And I was like, if I pass away tomorrow, I don't want my obituary to just be a list of credits. I want it to be about community impact. And so because that happened at the same time that I found the TONYC community, there was this sort of I think divine timing of me realizing that, I could use all of the same skills that I had learned as a classically trained actor to facilitate really important and transformational community dialogue. So yeah, I'll pause there, but that's kind of how I found myself in this place.
Thank you. Yeah, Jess?
This was about origin. I was a really bad teenager. I took drugs and drank and cut school, and this was a time I grew up in San Francisco in the 70s, and I was a street kid. I was like heading towards incarceration or death, and a woman named Gloria Unti, I'll never forget her name, had an improv group for kids. And I found in that group that I actually could help assist people to laugh and assist people to be present. And it was the first time I had a reason to live, a reason to keep going on. And I was a high school dropout, and now I have a PhD, and that's only because of the theater. And I think one eye-opening event for me was later in the 70s. I was at UC Santa Cruz, and I was working with El Teatro Campesino, which, if you don't know their work, go dig around. They're just incredible, and it was spiritual, and it was community-based. And they taught this workshop with other companies, and I saw that you could teach math with music, and you could teach non-hearing children to dance with the beat of drums, and you could teach history and to artists. And one of the things I did years later, my own child had a brain tumor and I had to resign from my professorship, and I made and ran for 8 years a youth theater company. And in that time, I realized that, and I was doing it as, paying it forward, because my life was literally saved as a 15, 16-year-old, someone you would never want your son around. But I, and my kids grew up in that theater company, and they're now artists in their own right. And and I think that is why I had such a hard time being a competitive actor in the New York theater scene, because there was something missing. There was the person working the camera says hello and tells us his name, because we're all here together, and we're all surviving on this earth together. And where did Sabrina go? I was going to say something about her. Bathroom, okay. Oh, now that didn't need to be said on live stream. But anyway, one of the plays, it's okay, no, it's good. But I just wanted to also say that Sabrina directed a play of mine right here, and it's a play I'm still working on, which I co-wrote. I'm also not a nice Jewish girl, but I co-wrote it with a Muslim actor, and it's called My Heart is in the East, and we're doing it for Interfaith Week in the UK. I mean, isn't that amazing that every November the UK has an Interfaith Week? I think that's pretty awesome. And but Sabrina was part of the beginning of that project as well. So it's all family. It's all family, and it's about, for me, I'm going to say one more thing. For me, it's all about courageous generosity. And, I can say when I was nearly dying of COVID, Daniel was my angel from 3,000 miles away, sending me herbs and things to keep going in the beginning of 2020. And, I've been in very odd situations with David all over the world. I won't talk about those. Anyway, I'm just so grateful to have you be part of this family this weekend.
It's profound, what even among people who I actually know quite well, but the invitation to think about origins and how we got here is very moving. I think this journey for me, in terms of began, I was in Brookline, Massachusetts in high school, and at a big public high school, Brookline High School, and there was a visionary man, Ian Ryrie, who was running the drama program there, and he had something called the Brookline Educational Theater Company. I kind of wandered in as sort of a sports kid, but the model of the Brookline Educational Theater Company was the students developing plays and devised works with adults from the community around social issues that mattered in their lives. I had no idea how radically different that was than what high school theater was in any place, but it made, I felt that those connections, that way of working, that way of sort of, as an only child of divorced parents, that sort of way of thinking about who I was and then being able to share that and get, you know, meaning and affirmation from that was very formative. And then I went to Northwestern for undergrad and then ended up being the graduate school. But I would say I was very much connecting to what Liz was talking about around the connection between grief and loss and sort of the way, you know, we were, as I think generationally many people in this room, we were just living right through the teeth of the AIDS epidemic. And I had family members who were incredibly close to me who we lost. We had friends and students who were part of my little theater company in Chicago who died in their early 20s. Like, this was, we were living. I think sometimes we, because the world is so broken, I think sometimes we forget what we've survived and like what we've been through before. And so my college experience was very, very much centered around personally that, and then a group of us, really without knowing much what we were doing, but this was before Angels in America, gathered and put together a piece that was really woven from our experiences that we were living in real time, and it struck a nerve and was invited to go places where it could comfort and heal and provide meaning. And I think in many ways, I'm now going to talk about this at a later point, doing something called the Art of Care initiative, which sort of centers narratives of care in a whole lot of context. But I feel like you could draw a lot of shapes, but there's a kind of real line from kind of that full circle to sort of like the power of what we do to bear witness to what we're trying to endure. And I'll just, since people did some shout outs, you know, we get where we get because of mentors and teachers. And so I and a generation of us at Northwestern encountered both an incredible man who died too young named Dwight Conquergood, who I wouldn't in so many ways be here without him, but then also theater makers like Frank Galati. And there was a sort of generation of us who inherited that those weren't necessarily people who collaborated deeply or even maybe fully understood the power of each other's work, but a generation of us who were able to kind of be at the nexus and then have, you know, others like, you know, I worked with Alen Sixu and people, you know, sort of the Studs Terkel, like people who were so much part of everything I do now. And I think that's what we get to do, is stitch the power and fabric of those influences. And that's really why moments like this, like to have, you know, 6 people to influence one another, and a group of people like this, I think those can be life-changing experiences. So,
yeah, it's interesting how all of our, you know, early experiences kind of sort of led us into this storytelling, but not just storytelling of plays that are written, but storytelling of personal stories of ourselves and also other people that we encounter in the community. And I think that's one thing that sort of, you know, that we've all been involved with, and many of you that I know also. I was, you know, undergrad, I was a pre-med biology major, determined to be a physician, as my parents wanted. But I ended up going to grad school at NYU and studied with Richard Schechner. And that was quite a shift from what I was used to. I'd never heard about the 60s or anything that happened in theater in the 60s in New York or even the 70s. But, you know, that was the beginning of a shift. He was my advisor, my teacher. Around the time that I arrived here, I met this amazing woman who completely changed my life, named Ellen Stewart, who, as you know, is MaMa of MaMa Theater. And, you know, that should have shifted things again, and I could see what she's up to. Thanks, Derek. What she was doing and the kind of spaces she was creating, and that was really inspiring to me. So, you know, that relationship kept growing while I was doing a lot of other kinds of jobs, including, you know, working in the union of the directors and choreographers, which sort of showed me the other side of what it means to be a professional artist and getting paid for what you do, and that's not anything to be ashamed of, that we actually, as much as our heart goes out to all the kinds of work that we want to do in different communities, I think there's a sort of lack of value of artists, professional artists in a way. And I think we need to express our own value of what we do ourselves, so other people will value it as well. But that's like a whole other conversation. So, so we all came to this place, and all of you from many different places, but we're all right now in a very specific time, in the time in the United States, in the world. And as you think about the processes that you work in and the kinds of work that you do, and maybe you've sort of touched on this already, but where does the connection come between your sense of the value of what we do and meeting the moment that we're in? Do things change of what you were doing because we're faced with the things that we're faced with now? And this is for anybody who wants to answer that.
I think there's one thing that is a little bit of a paradigm shift, which is not what is the play I need to write, but what is the play that needs to be heard. So addressing, and Daniel used the word necessity, what do people need to be thinking about? When you go into a TO space, you discover that, and playback space, you discover that. But as a theater maker and a playwright and an actor, I've just written a huge 9-person ensemble play that we're doing in a couple weeks, and it's a story I needed to tell. But if it's not going to resonate and help people, and if it's not going to create conversations around the issues, I don't want to talk about the play, I want to talk about what it brings up for you. And is there the one difference between Theater of the Oppressed, or at least the work that I've done? Can you see me when I turn and look at you? It's probably ridiculous.
No, I can. We're connected.
Okay, I'm looking at you. I think the one thing that's different about drama therapy is the processing that goes on afterwards. We don't usually process the work after TO emotionally so much with the people who've been engaged in it. As far as I know, I'd love to talk to you more about that. But so I've really always now have audience engagement in every single project. There's always some kind of engagement so that I can see if the work is resonating. And it's never like, thank you for coming, goodbye. There's always something intertwined. And that's, I think, was that answer the question? Yeah. I don't remember the question.
Well, we're talking about, how your work relates to this moment, and what you were saying, the paradigm shift, which is, it's really interesting because I know the play that Jessica's referring to, and because it's so much about human relationships between different generations, it feels so relevant even without hammering you over with a political message. So
David read a part in it the other night, which he was wonderful. But I think one of the other things, we're going to do it in New Jersey at this lake community, and I got all the inhabitants of the lake together, and they read the play, non-actors, and it was like, oh wow, so now they're really excited to see professional actors come from New York and do it, because they all well, that's my character, and I thought that was a really cool to do that. That was fun to read the work with an audience so that they have more, they're stakeholders now in the process of that.
I'll just say something brief that builds on that. I think with the question of the what right now, in terms of is who, which has always been the question, but who are we telling these stories with and for? And I think it's always been a complicated question, but we have solidarity to build and work to do among people who are quote unquote aligned in ways, and then there are bridges to build, depending, and so it's been interesting for me to the processes I've been doing really grew very organically out of the work. I think we all, being in a lot of rooms where I was trying to get people to help people to feel at home with risk. This is what we do in rehearsal rooms and classrooms. If we're working on a difficult play, we're not a lot of hours we're going to get to spend together, but we're asking people to give so much of their inner worlds. So we all have techniques that are sort of like, how do we come to trust and know each other? And I learned, sort of cobbled together and was doing some of that, and then going on to the next thing, which maybe was like directing a difficult play that had about genocide and sexual violence and things, but because we built trust, we could do that work more. And what started to happen is that enough times people were like, that thing we did at the beginning was really meaningful, but then we moved on from it. And so I started to kind of slow down a bit, to kind of more intentionally look at what at the time were a little bit haphazardly cobbled together processes around that. And I say that because that has led now, as I say, I'm doing a lot of this in rooms that aren't quote-unquote arts rooms. They're people who are working in humanitarian spaces. They're people who are working around polarization. They're diplomats. But I think I've sort of always believed that we're all artists as a kind of like adage, but to actually really be in the presence of the skills that are around deep listening and empathy, and sort of, I think people have kind of reductively will say things like, they'll assume that I'm doing that work and that my real art is happening when I'm working on a play. And I feel like, in fact, the artistic work happening in these rooms is every bit, feeds the artistic muscle in every bit as richly as in any rehearsal room. But I guess I'm just saying that who we're with and for whom has always mattered, but I think because we're in these live spaces, it's a very important question for us to be intentional about right now. Sorry to go on so long.
No, thank you. I don't know, Liz, Daniel, Hannah.
Liz?
I can jump in. I can also, I'll jump in. And this isn't what I thought I was going to say, but I think just because like plays keep on coming up, and I will always have a bone to pick with commercial theater, regardless of whether or not I see it do it. But I think a lot of what we're doing, just purely by virtue of a lot of this theater being free for audiences to see, right? A lot of it being like low budget, right? You don't need the investors to produce this, but just by virtue of this kind of work living in the simplest kind of storytelling, just the body being there, and replicating these things without a whole lot of bells and whistles and frills. I think that already does something that's really important in this moment, because it allows those that aren't looking for escape, but rather like the accessibility of it all, right? Just completely changes who's engaged in this kind of theater. And so I think that's a really important part of like how this work is addressing what's happening now, because it's saying like we actually don't need all of that materialistic stuff to liberate ourselves, that we have everything that we need. And I think that's a really radical place to come from. I also think, like, again, what everyone here is doing, just by virtue of it being face-to-face, and I know, like, I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite here on Zoom, but, like, face-to-face and body-to-body dialogue is also really critical. It becomes very easy to stay disconnected and apathetic when we're constantly on these screens. And I think, to be a little bit more specific about Theater of the Oppressed, which asks for spectators to become spect actors, that's a really critical part of how my work is responding to the moment. Because again, back to this apathy that is, I think, allowing a lot of people to to watch injustice happening around the world, to watch genocide happening around the world and not do anything, and being in rehearsal and preparing to do something about it, and not waiting for again a whole bunch of money to come in or a certain kind of audience to come in and saying, oh, actually no, we have everything we need right now to be rehearsing for the revolution. I think that's how Theater of the Oppressed is responding to what's happening.
Do you find that the stories that the communities you work in, as they tell their stories and you create the plays, are the stories changing now from when you began in terms of, because of the condition of things now? Do you notice them, or are they pretty much similar?
I would say that they are tend to be more the same in my experience. Just in that, like, I think we've been talking about things that aren't necessarily like the hot button issue, but there's things that are chronically wrong with society, chronically wrong with systems. And so, yeah, is there more of a pressure cooker? Absolutely. But like, it's been hard for the most marginalized to access benefits for decades. And now more people are being impacted by that. But there were always those who were on the margins who were having trouble accessing those benefits, and we were doing plays about that, 12 years ago, and we're still doing plays about that. So yeah, I tend to find that our stories are kind of the same because, yeah, a lot of the chronic issues are really just coming to a head for some. But I think those of us on the front lines have been seeing the same issues for years and years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So much for me to be thinking about as these other panelists speak, because I also practice TO, and Richard Schechner was my mentor as well, and taught me so much. So playback theater was designed to meet the moment, right? So in playback theater, it's improvisational, it's spontaneous, ritual. The stories, the play, the source material emerges with whoever is gathered from the audience. So in that way, as playback theater companies do their performances all around the world, the stories that need to be told right now are coming out into the space and being heard. In my companies, my playback theater companies, we've always centered marginalized stories. So that's been a priority for me. That's not the case for all playback theater companies. Some people just do their companies for, people who look just like them or for their little neighborhood, and it's very homogenous and bland. No, that's a judgment. So for me, making sure that we are really serving all kinds of communities is important. Playback theater right now is not meeting the moment, specifically around the Palestine-Israel-Gaza conflict. This is a very painful reality in playback theater right now, in that, now for several years, but especially this last year and a half, the Arab playback community is not wanting to listen to or be in the same room as the Israeli playback community. In Israel, there are 120 professional playback theater companies. So playback theater is all over Israel and in Palestine. Playback theater has been in Israel for decades, really to address stories of trauma. And there has been a growing Arab playback community now for several years. And the conflict and the tension has grown and grown to the point now where people are very hurt, very upset, boycotting conferences. The last conference one happened last weekend in Salamanca, Spain. There were no Israelis there. There were 350 people there from, I don't know how many countries, 60 countries, no Israelis. 2 years ago in South Africa, big international playback theater conference. No Israelis. They're feeling hurt. They're feeling excluded. They're feeling attacked. They're saying that I'm not my government. And the Arab playback community is saying, well, why aren't you recognizing that this is a genocide? So there is a real rift and a wound that playback theater, so far, the theater of dialogue and listening, has not been able to address or heal or create space for getting us all in the room to listen to each other's stories and different points of view. So this is a real, I'm distressed about this daily, as are my parents, as are many of us, and I don't see a path forward. I can't see the building blocks of the bridge. So in Salamanca, Spain, where 300-something people just gathered last weekend, there was a little kerfuffle around this. 2 people got kicked out of the conference. You know, I'm not going to get into the details of the sides, but so at this moment, playback, who has been very effective at dialogue and conflict resolution, is not rising to the occasion, is not effective for some reason yet. I will say, I'll just end by saying, with the Ukrainian-Russian war, also kind of lots of Russians in playback, lots of Ukrainians in playback, you know, different sides of the war in our community. What was wonderful was right after, you know, this has now been going on, for 2 or 3 years, right? So at the beginning of this other terrible war, our Ukrainian playback colleagues were going down into bunkers while their city was being bombed and doing playback underground and zooming all of us in. So the rest of the world were supporting these Ukrainian, you know, the oppressed or the folks who were being attacked by showing up to their show online in the bunker. You know, so like it was like theater or bust, theater or die. We're going to keep telling our stories, and we around the world will keep listening. You know, we will find a way, which we did with the Gaza story. Not so much at this moment.
Can I ask you a question about that? Is that okay? Yeah, please. So I did playback a lot in the West Bank, especially through the Freedom Theater. There's something called the Freedom Bus, and my dear friend Ben, and I did that for a long time, and it seemed like, and Ben and I both do TO and playback, but it seemed that playback was so essential, and more essential at that point than TO, because the people in Palestine really felt that their stories were not being heard and they needed to tell their stories. So that the story aspect of playback and the work that we were doing through the Palestinian villages was so instrumental, for years. Do you feel like that's still going on?
The Palestinians absolutely are telling their stories and need to tell their stories and need to be heard. And many of us are listening to those stories. Movement isn't so easy, so you know, I was invited to present at a multicultural conference in Akko, Israel, the north of Israel. It's an Arab part of Israel, and this was 2 years ago, and there were Arab playbackers, Israeli playbackers. It was a very this is before the recent war. It was a very rich, meaningful gathering of both Jewish and Arab people in this work. I would hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. It was quite special. The Palestinians couldn't come. They can't leave the West Bank. So they were unable to be there. It's, I don't know, it's just some miles down the road. There are checkpoints. They're unable to leave. So, but at this point, you know, it brings up this word of inclusion for us right now, which has been sort of a pillar of sort of a very important central playback theater principle, is how do we create inclusive spaces? But a lot of folks are having issues with this word right now. You know, To what end? To whose expense? Because the Arab folks in this community feel, the Palestinians can't tell their stories. They don't feel safe if the Israeli folks are present. So it's complex, painful, tricky, lots of points of view, and still no dialogue.
When you were thinking about we're thinking about the Ukrainian and Russia situation and how it's different. Did you find that playback companies in Russia and in Ukraine still would collaborate?
Yeah, in fact, I have a few colleagues who left Russia and hooked up with a Ukrainian. Actually, they got married. A woman from Ukraine, a woman from Russia, they met, they decided to both leave because of this war. They now live in Berlin. And in Berlin, I think there are 3 Ukrainian-Russian playback theater companies. In Berlin, like Israel, there are many, many playback theater companies, including a sex-positive company and this company and that company. But the Russian-Ukrainian collaboration and ability to kind of figure out how to, I don't know if I know any Russians who are who aren't against the war in Russia. So it's a little bit of a different situation, some different dynamics there.
Yeah, thanks.
How's everybody doing? It feels like we're having a conversation among ourselves, but it's like,
we're going to open it up to everybody too.
I was trying to figure out, I have a mind map, a little drawing on my piece of paper here. But Liz, thank you. You helped give me a kind of a way in to figure out how to, you said something about face-to-face. And that helps me figure out how to begin to talk about the current moment. DNA Works' work is about identity and heritage and complex identity and mixed heritage and multiple heritages and gender identity and sexual, just the plurality and multiplicity of identity as the norm rather than as the exception, and also, hopefully creating, when we were founded 20 years ago, there were very few and often not really good stories or, helpful stories being told. Language would be used like, which half are you? And, it's like, we're all everything. There's no halves, right half, left half, top half, bottom half. And we found that very, very quickly that by doing Q&As after our work, and our work spans theater, film, dance theater, installation art, just lots of different disciplines, really sort of necessity. What's needed in that moment, as Jess said, what story needs to be told and how. Oftentimes, someone would sit through a beautiful dance theater piece about mixed heritage, and then the first question would be, so which half of you is Jewish, or which half of you is this? And it was like, what did we just do? Refer back to, but what would also happen is people would stand up and they would say, oh my gosh, you just told my story. And sometimes it was literally their story. And I remember one situation, there are many of these, but just to give you an example, I directed a play by Christina Anderson. We performed it in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's about a mixed heritage, light-skinned black woman who's seeking her identity and trying to figure out where she belongs and goes through the city looking for her people. And in what we now do after is story circles, as I lead a community story circle, a 14-year-old Navajo, Dene, sheep herder stood up and said, you've just told my story. Yes, because by appearances, it's like, what is this connection? But then as he began to tell his life and what it's like to move between the res and, so the story circles, the prompt is, what is the connection between what you've just seen and your life? And we did one of our touring productions, The Real James Bond was Dominican, at City Theater in Pittsburgh for 5 weeks in January and February, so right after the inauguration. And audience member after audience member after audience member stood up and said, "Thank you for this space. Thank you for this ability to be in an intimate space and listen and share and feel connected, because we feel completely disconnected in this moment from ourselves, from each other." And part two of the story, when the election happened, you know the one I'm talking about, I was in a hospital bed. I had leukemia last year. I'm fine. I'm in remission, but went through 5 rounds of chemo where they knocked out my immune system completely 5 times, and I had to rebuild from zero. And so I was being taken care of in the most intimate and caring way. And whereas the first election, you know the one I'm talking about, I was in complete despair. I realized something in that moment about intimacy and hyper-localism. I don't know if that's a word. And care. And how my work now, my understanding of my work now, is to, even more so than we've already done, create these spaces where we can let our shoulders down, where we're creating work that does not trigger the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, but actually encourages a state of homeostasis, where we can breathe. I actually do a lot of breathing with audience members. We can breathe now. And hopefully, through this parasympathetic nervous state, hear each other, see each other, encounter ourselves, hear ourselves in a way that we can create what I'm calling, given that we have, been hearing for many years about terror cells, and now we have domestic terror cells, but I won't mention who's running them, but cells of love, like this room. Like if we can fill our time and our life and our work up with rooms just like this, that the incremental change, because obviously the big sweeping changes have gotten swept away. We had the winds, and now all of that is being wiped away. But if on a hyper-local level we have this kind of connection and listening and breathing and singing and dancing together, there's hope for us. That, for me, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's what my body tells me in this moment is. And so care, which has been fundamental for DNA Works' work for a very long time, even before COVID, we were talking about slow life, slow art. Like, why does everything have to be done in a rush? We have a piece that's premiering in the spring that we've taken 6 years to build, because it took 6 years to build the trust, to do the work, to address the homophobia and anti-gay violence, and take those and work with the community and not traumatize, making sure that we are not traumatizing any audience. Yes. So analyzing it from multiple perspectives, from every identity perspective that we can analyze it from, to make sure that that work is liberational and not traumatizing. And also now we're working to make sure that every single one of our performances, not just the 2 at the end of the run, but every single one of our performances is accessible to everybody of every ability or disability. Every performance is sensory friendly. Every performance is a relaxed performance, etc. I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but we're close. We're actually really, really close. We have some really good partners in this. So this idea of care starting at home, care starting with the artists, care starting with the people working in the building, what I call the concentric circles of community. There's the people on the stage, there's the people in the audience, there's the people upstairs, there's the people near the theater, there's the people far from the theater. Like, we are working in concentric circles of community constantly, whether we acknowledge it or not. So when we do our warm-up and circle-up before shows, we invite the crew, we invite the box office staff. Of course, the box office staff can't because they're selling tickets, but we invite the ushers, we invite, anybody, and it always starts off with, like, nobody comes, and then by the end of the run, everybody's there, and we have 25 people in the circle, right? And I just think that this field that most of us probably got into theater because we were looking for some kind of belonging. We were looking for some space where we felt normal and not abnormal. You know, the word affectionately freaks gets used. We were the freaks, and we, you know, created our families of choice. But the industry has become so, and this is going back to what you were saying, Liz, the industry has become so oppressive and exploitational and transactional. And how do we, you know, what goes in the batter comes out in the cake, right? How do we create batters that are not poisoned, so we're not feeding audiences poison? And so these are the things that are like the daily practice now, the daily mindfulness practice is, how do we have these intimate spaces? How do we create care so that everybody is healthy? How do we acknowledge and engage everybody, all the concentric circles, and making sure that everybody has equal access to the work? And I'll just shout out, I said story circles, and I have to say that during the Theater Without Borders event that has been referenced several times, John O'Neill led a story circle in this space and became a mentor of mine. And I had been like doing story circles that I didn't know were story circles, like with the old age home and Home for the Aged in Williamstown, Massachusetts. But really to learn leading story circles from John has been a huge influence on me, immense influence. And so just that, you know, all of this, MaMa, Richard Schechner, like all this stuff happening here, that this was the space that I got to see him lead a story circle for the first time. So thanks for letting me ramble.
Thank you.
Can I just do a quick shout out to somebody who's not with us, who's Chen Alan from Combatants for Peace, who didn't get a visa to be able to join us. And he's doing work with Israelis and Palestinians that is really phenomenal and in some ways more successful than anything else that I know of. And I just wanted to, before I forget, to have you like look up Combatants for Peace. And then one more thing, yeah, they're just doing incredible work. And the other thing I want to say is that in that first election that Daniel referenced, which happened, I think, in 2016, my colleague Sue Hamilton and I created Artists Rise Up New York and Artists Rise Up Los Angeles. Artists Rise Up New York lasted about a year, and partly it was my inability to convince people to keep volunteering their art, but we did 5 pieces and La MaMa, all at La MaMa. But Artists Rise Up LA is still going. Apparently, people in LA have more time and longer lunches to volunteer, but it's still happening. And I would love it if we could get Artists Rise Up New York going again. So if anybody's interested, please let me know. And Sabrina, I shouted out to you a lot while you were out of the room, and I just want to shout out to Joan too, who's directing a play of mine on Monday that is about the AIDS crisis. My brother died of AIDS, and I said I gave her some. She's doing a festival of women playwrights. I just want to say that's especially in a time when women are not being represented in the industry, and Joan King. I mean, you can hear more about it as the weekend goes on, but I gave her a choice of different things, and she chose this one because I think it's time that we bring it up again. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, as Daniel mentioned, the conversation has been mostly up here, and I do want to include everybody who has something they want to say or ask to be part of the conversation. We don't have that much time left. We have like 15 minutes left, but please, whatever you want to say or add or ask, please join. And I will bring you a mic because otherwise nobody will hear you.
Hi, my name is Lillian, and I'm just thinking of this idea of doing work that is not triggering the nervous system. Like, that really resonated with me, and it made me think back to a time where I was most attracted to work that did trigger my nervous system and the audience's nervous system and taking the audience on a journey. So in thinking about what we're all going through across the world in our lives, just day to day, like I'm just going to be reflecting on this idea of how can I think about my work in bringing down the nervous system and taking these breaths. Like that was very eye-opening for me.
And I think, thank you for that. And also, I just want to point out that capitalism functions on triggering our nervous system. Advertisement, blockbuster movies, everything is either inducing some sort of fear or some sort of lack, or it's a scarcity mindset that we're sold. Like, you don't have this thing, you need this thing, right? And it's done through this addiction to a particular kind of neurological response. And so so we can actually be the antidote to that. We can provide the unspaces, right? The spaces that allow the shoulders to go down, that allow the breath to drop. That I don't know how many people know this because it still hasn't really hit the mainstream yet, but there was a research is being done around the world. It's called physiological synchrony, that audience heartbeats synchronize while watching a performance. And in the case of music, audience heartbeats synchronize with the performers while watching a performance. In the case of people who attend the theater together, that know each other, their heartbeats stay synchronized longer than the people who didn't know each other coming into the... So this like ancient wisdom, right, in every culture, that performance is necessary, that performance is medicine, that performance is healing, that performance binds the community. And, I know when I came to New York 30-something years ago and talked in this way, and I mean, the responses I got from like the artistic directors of theater was like, "You're crazy, how do you prove that?" Da-da. Well, guess what? It's been proven now. People put machines on people and now it's proven great. So we trust the mechanical science and not the human science. But we need to know that that's our, like that's the impact that we can have, that we do have.
No, I just thought of Richard, and he would talk about Victor Turner, who's the theater anthropologist guy who wrote Beyond Theater, I think. Anyway, communitas is what Victor Turner would talk about, and the bond that is created in the audience while watching the performance. And that's really, to me, what playback is about. My favorite part of a playback theater performance is afterwards. After we've all shared our stories that have just bubbled up in that moment and needed to be told, and then suddenly there's what we call the red thread, which is like how all of our stories are actually connected in this really unknowing way. And then we get to chit-chat afterwards, and you walk out as a community of neighbors and not strangers. And that's communitas, the bond that's created through the kind of work that we do.
Extraordinary. Other voices here? Yeah. I'll give you the mic.
Hi, this is so nourishing. Thank you so much for this gathering and all of you for being here. I'm Layla Buck. Hi. Yes, dear ones. I want to put something in the space with like love and emotion. So, because I think in what was bubbling for me in resonating with so much that you said, and then hearing about the challenges with the Arab-Israeli playback, I'm thinking of a conversation, long story short, in 2011, when I was in Palestine, when I was in the West Bank, and then when I was in Israel, around BDS and around cultural boycott, and talking to Palestinians who no longer at that point even would agree to sort of like the dual orchestras, for example, who had been part of the dialogue groups. And basically when I sort of pushed back in my, and said, but, all the good things, right? Said, but afterwards to this thing, but afterwards, they will be on the checkpoint and I will be in the cage, right, in the line in the cage. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm looking to you too, Liz, with Theater of the Oppressed, and thinking about, as the things you're saying, how do we do this work that's so grounded in all the beautiful empathy and compassion and care, and navigate power and just power differentials that are in the space and that impact the people during and after, and how do we hold both of those things as a community, as practitioners, as leaders. And I'd just love to, obviously it's a huge question, we don't have to, but that's the thing I want to put in the space that's in my heart. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Other voices here that want to share? Okay, well, it's a shy group. Okay.
Really appreciated, Daniel, what you were saying about the local, about what's immediate. And I love that phrase, start from where you are. And I'm going to take that with me today, this idea of who is around you in your community, in your cohort, to begin to nourish that and see where those concentric circles of impact go from there. Just the local, I thought was really a great observation.
Can I just say one thing to what you said before, and you can too. One of the things that I feel is a step that I miss, is the making of sacred space, is to actually make the space safe. And I've been doing it wherever I go with altars, is creating an altar and just asking everybody to bring whatever they want, whatever's sacred to them, a key, a shoe, whatever is meaningful, into the space of an altar that represents earth, air, fire, and water, represents the elements, which could be, a water bottle and a piece of red for fire, or it could be anything, and then all the sacred objects, to really work on making the space safe. I often don't feel safe in a Broadway theater. I want to go, I don't feel like the energy is safe, and sometimes it's kind of what Daniel was talking about, this sense of care. I've been an audience in places where I wish there were two, one on each side, a social worker and a therapist there, that the space is contained and it's cared for, and that we know that, and whatever sort of physical metaphors we can bring in to create that space together, even if it's just, a gesture, it is, in a way, a communal act of making the space feel safe.
Yeah, thank you.
Just again to respond to you as well, Layla. I think it's a really important point that you bring up. I know my Lebanese playback colleagues will tell you that it's illegal for them to be in the same room as an Israeli person. And, that goes way beyond my outside understanding of global politics and these governments that we all have to contend with and fight against. And you read my mind, because at this latest gathering that just happened, that was meaningful and wonderful, but also very hard, because there was a whole country missing, and a lot of our dear colleagues were missing. I started to think about how in the early days, playback was super local. We all just served our own communities. I had a company in New York City for 17 years, and we traveled. But if you were to go outside your city, you would really work and collaborate with the person who had the company in Boston or wherever. Now, since COVID, playback has become very multinational. The borders got very blurry. There are many companies with people from different countries. And I sort of wonder if we need to kind of distill it back down, or narrow the focus and really remember and go back out into our own local neighborhoods. And that might not be the answer, but it's gotten so big and so complicated because we're dealing with borders and governments, and I do think we will find a way forward. Ben Rivers is still around and all these, but it is really tricky when you're dealing with power. And finally, I just wanted to say that looking at our own power and privilege is such an important part of this work, probably for all of us. And so again, whose story, as the MC up here, who has the next story, and various hands go up, you know, whose voice have we not heard is really an important question always.
Well, we will be hearing more about that in just a few minutes as we move into the playback workshop that you're gonna do. I cannot believe how quickly this time has gone by and how kind of full I am already and overwhelmed. And there's something already, as you were all saying, in this space, in this room, that I don't want us to lose. But we are going to have to take a break and reset the room, and we'll be back here at 4 o'clock for the work with Hannah. There are a couple of other minor housekeeping things. So I think most people have figured out that restrooms are on the 4th floor and the 1st floor and not on this floor. But if you feel you need to go out at any time, take care of yourselves in the space as we're taking care of each other. Also, when you arrive in the mornings, it is likely, although I'm trying to fix it, that we will not be able to actually get into the building till just before 10. So if you come earlier, you might be hanging out outside or you go for a coffee or something, but just before 10 the doors will be opened by the person who's working downstairs, and then we will be able to move into the space. We're always going to be in this space, although it be configured differently. You can already see the sort of richness that awaits you. Michael Rode, who is not here today, apologized. He's on the road and couldn't join us. But we'll see. Hopefully, we will see him on Monday. So he apologized for that. And I'm just so happy that you're all here. And we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Yeah. You said you had to reset the room. Can we leave our names or can we take them out? You could keep them against the walls, and we're going to move all the chairs against the wall. Or do you want to leave the chairs this way?
So we just need an open space here, and I would say I think the chairs there are fine. If we need a little more space, we'll just smush them a bit that way. But you can leave your stuff.
And there's water in the room across the way, and have a nice break. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the people on live stream, HowlRound. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everybody.